topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, home base for me. If we've not met yet and you don't know me, I'm a management consultant, organizational logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Elise Cortez and Associates help companies enliven their operations by articulating their purpose and building inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose to turn those companies from a flatline EKG to a vibrant workplace. There, people are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, grow to their fullest, and are committed to stay and help deliver on the company's mission. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at elisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, with us today is Faisal Hoque, an accomplished entrepreneur, senior executive, author, thought leader, public speaker, and advisor to management teams and boards of directors with more than 25 years of cross-industry success. He's the founder of Shadaka, if I'm saying that right, Next Chapter, and other companies which focus on enabling sustainable and transformational changes. As a thought leader, he has authored a number of books on leadership, innovation, mindfulness, resilience, organizational transformation, and entrepreneurship. Today, we're talking about his latest book, Lift, Fostering the Leader in You Amid Revolutionary Change. He joins us today from the state of Connecticut. Faisal, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you for having me.
You're so very welcome. And I have to just start off by saying what a schlock you are. Clearly, you know, all of these books, all the things that you've been doing, and this is the latest baby you've brought into the world. Thank you for doing this, Faisal. As you know, I read the books cover to cover, and this is fabulous work. So because our listeners, you're welcome. Our listeners don't know you yet quite the way that I do because they have not delved into your book, your background. Let's just start by giving them a little bit of taste of your background and where and why you decided to write this book as well.
So, look, I've had a myriad of entrepreneurial career. I'm a technology entrepreneur. So I've built few tech companies along the way, and but I've also worked for large Fortune 500 companies like GE, Pitney Bowes, and others. And throughout my entrepreneurial career, I worked with some of the largest brand out there, with GE, Amex, DoD, DHS, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then writing, 20 years ago, I wrote my first book, and I wasn't quite, started by saying that I'll be a writer. It's kind of almost happened accidentally. I wrote my first book arguing that if you can't focus on business model, technology doesn't mean anything, and that was coming from a technologist. And since then, I've written quite a few books. So you're asking about Lift. Lift I wrote about, I think, 24 months ago now when I started writing it, and then it came out last year. Lift was kind of a call to the change that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. And the change in many facets of change. We obviously lived through a pandemic. We lived through climate change. We're living through climate change. We're living through massive technological revolution. And then you look at all the misinformation that we are bombarded with every day. And now we're also facing all this AI-driven misinformation. So the world has gotten very complicated. So I was writing the book primarily to say that, if you want to lift others, first you have to lift yourself. And it was dedicated to my son, who is 20 years old, for that generation, because they're going to have one hell of a time dealing with all the things that they're going to inherit. So it's a it kind of takes an optimistic view, but also a very pragmatic and realistic view where we are and how we can improve the planet. But first and foremost, how do we prepare ourselves to do that? So that's basically the message.
Beautiful. And there's several bits that I wanted to dive into, as we only have about just under an hour on the show, so I can't go through everything I want to talk about, but I pulled out the things that I really want to focus on. So first, I think it's really important for us to recognize, listeners and viewers, that there's something in the book centrality that is really important for us to situate, and that's what Faisal calls the fourth industrial revolution. So if you would please, Faisal, just talk a little bit about what is it and why is it so important to rivet our attention on?
So look, I mean, technology, the fourth industrial revolution is basically a convergence of all sorts of technology. I mean, it used to be that, we had the industrial revolution, and then we had, information technology revolution that we have seen, last, 15, 20 years, when at the dawn, started with the dawn of internet. But now we're seeing this convergence of technology where robotics and AI and information technology and nanotechnology all is converging, and it's making things much more complicated, but very much accelerated, right? So how we think, how we work, how we play, how we communicate, it's all kind of convoluted of a lot of different things. And fourth industrial revolution is defined by this convergence of many different technology, biotechnology, information technology, artificial intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. So that creates a whole different set of socio-economic and business challenges that society as a whole is facing, and as we're observing.
Yeah, and to your point, I would, if looking at that as an actual leader, you might just say, who in the heck wants to face this, right? This is way too much to take on, which is why I completely am enamored with your whole idea, the promise and introduction that you give of transformational leadership. So if you can contrast that with what you compare in the book with traditional transactional leadership.
Look, I mean, traditionally leadership, especially if you talk about in the context of business, I mean, it has always been you have some goal, you have some, outcome-driven matrix, and you pursue that, and you run your organization from quarter to quarter, and you try to achieve something, right? And we have been seeing this transition where people have started talking about long-term value, maybe last 5, 6, 7 years. And post-pandemic, with all the change in workforce and the mentality and where the planet is going, that kind of quarterly mentality absolutely doesn't work, right? So why it doesn't work is that we're so interconnected, and you cannot think without thinking about a long-term view, how your action impacts others, let alone your own organization. So transformational leadership focuses on that long-term view, but with an empathetical lens, so that you can understand what's happening above and beyond your immediate surrounding, and how does your action impacts that. So that actually works on an individual level when you're interacting with one-on-one basis, but it also works at a broader context when you're talking about your organization, and then obviously your ecosystem, and then society in general. So transformational leadership is a long-term view with a lot of emotional intelligence baked into it, things, meaning the empathetical outlook and how you interact and how you inspire and influence other people, versus just trying to measure from quarter to quarter with some sort of a short-term outlook or outcome.
Wonderful explanation. And I want to layer in a bit more, because I always like to be able to educate and inspire our listeners and viewers. So in the model of transformational leadership, you talk about 4 factors, also known as, you call them, the 4 I's: idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration. So I wanted to call those out, because that's a lot, back to the whole notion of really developing a robust capacity to lead. That's a lot to be able to be good at.
Yeah, and by the way, I can't take credit for that, because this idea has been in place since '70s. We just haven't caught on to it, right? But in general, if you really boil it down to, because we as a society have a lot of choices, and individuals have a lot of choices, and we have access to a lot of different things. The old style of leadership, where it doesn't inspire and influence and moves people forward with some sort of ideology that people can really hang on to, is very difficult to attract and motivate and to move any kind of project. And it doesn't matter what size or shape the organization is. It could be a company of 2 people, or it could be a company of 200,000 people. Same principle applies. So that's really, because we have more choices, emotionally attracting other people to your idea and trying to motivate them with inspiration has become much more critical than it has ever been.
Mm-hmm. And I want to take it, I completely agree with that, of course. I have a couple of books that sort of speak to that, so I completely agree with that. But I want to take it another step further, and I want to read just a passage from your book. It's so beautifully written, and I think it will really help our listeners and viewers orient themselves to the promise, the possibility of transformational leadership. So you say in your book, transformational leaders focus on people. They encourage, inspire, and motivate those around them to innovate and foster positive change. These leaders encourage autonomy and creativity. They are open and responsive to change. They're agile by choice, not by mandate. They are keenly aware of the impact their decisions have on those around them, as well as themselves. Transformational leaders understand both internal and external models. How they choose to lead themselves works hand in hand with how they work and inspire others. That's so beautifully written.
Thank you. I mean, it's this realization that you just read out from Lift has been kind of grabbing hold inside of me probably last 20 years or so. And I wrote a book called Everything Connects right before Lift, and I talk a lot about self-actualization and mindfulness and how that allows you to connect within yourself and then allows you to connect outside. And that it's kind of like a next chapter of that, if I can use that, in Lift. And it's really important to understand that particular paragraph, because when I'm talking about leadership, I'm not just talking about people who has the title of leadership. It's an individual. It could be a student. It could be somebody of my son's age. It could be somebody like my father, or it could be my spouse. That particular paragraph applies to anybody and everybody, because in order to understand outside, you really have to kind of understand yourself and how you portray and navigate your daily activity to connect with other people, and as a result try to make some sort of impact, however you want to define impact. Impact could be that you serve at a soup kitchen to help some people who are less fortunate, or it could be that you're a teacher, or it could be an entrepreneur. So that definition applies to anybody and everybody.
Mm-hmm. So I have a wonderful seat in the house, in the world, if you will, Faisal, and that's sitting right here across this mic from people like you. So last week I had on Julia Fabris McBride talking about the book that she co-wrote with Ed O'Malley, and it's called When Everyone Leads, the Toughest Challenges Get Seen and Solved. Essentially what they're saying is the world is way too complex today to have just a leader or a few leaders trying to tackle them. They need to enroll everyone in the organization as leaders, and there's a similar smack to your message as well. So I like when you say, for example, in your book, you say, when we talk about lift, it refers to the opportunity we all have to contribute to the betterment of everyone through transformational leadership. We may act individual, but the impact of what each of us does can be truly global. That's so empowering, so encouraging and inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very fundamental message, is that, even though we talk about change, we didn't call the book Change, we called it Lift. The idea of lift is that if you somehow can lift yourself, then maybe you have an opportunity to lift other people. So you don't have to have this grandiose vision of you have to change the world, and that's the definition of world. That's the definition of leadership. It could be that you're just lifting your surrounding, the 2 people that you work with, or somebody you take care of, or your family, whatever the case may be. Because if we all did that, then collectively we'll be lifted, right? So that's really the message here, that it's a leadership is everybody's responsibility. It is not a privilege banner for only few. That's really the message.
Yeah, and if you listened carefully to the introduction of this show, you heard an emphasis on everyone wants to matter. Everyone does want to matter. They want to know that they made a difference through their efforts in their lives. And so I like very much that, what you're putting forth, what I'm putting forth is absolutely not just an invitation, but an encouragement, a drive, a catalyst to come and share your talents, because the world desperately needs your talents, my talents, her talents, their talents.
Absolutely. I mean, and we are all unique individuals. That's something unique to offer, right? So all we have to do is find somehow that unique talent or unique purpose or unique opportunity that we have, and just shine on that, right? If we can do that, that's enough. We don't have to change. We don't have to have a mandate to change the world. Each one of us doesn't have to have that mandate. We just change our surrounding world, and as a result, there's that old saying, especially in the Eastern saying, that plant few trees around your home, and it will become a garden, and then that garden becomes a forest, right? So it's similar ideas, right? So you don't have to go and take on, foresting the entire planet. Just plant few trees around your homes, and that will be a good starting point.
Wonderful way to take us into our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Faisal Hoque. He's the author of Lift, Fostering the Leader in You Amid Revolutionary Change. We've been talking a bit about where this book came from and why it's so important, and the centrality of being and becoming a transformational leader. After the break, we'll continue the conversation and talk about some of the key areas that he brings forth in the book that are really important for us to understand and see how we can actually impact. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us. Welcome back. Before we get back to the program, I am very excited to announce the launch of actually, it's not just mine, it's the Purpose and Joy Tour. This is a collaboration with Joyly, an organization that teaches mindful practices to build happy, healthy, resilient world. And my firm, Elise Cortez and Associates, that exists to awaken people to their passion and purpose and building leadership and cultures that support these efforts. Together, we're going to 33 cities across the United States, starting in Dallas in March and finishing in Virginia Beach in October, to find our tribe and build a community of people who seek to elevate their lives and businesses by cultivating meaning, purpose, and joy. You can find the cities, dates, and planned events at gusto-now.com. Then go to the events tab. Very excited to be with you in your own backyard. Find your city, mark your calendar, and register for your events. If you're just now joining the program, my guest is Faisal Hoque. He's an accomplished entrepreneur, senior executive, author, thought leader, public speaker, and advisor to management teams and boards of directors with more than 25 years of cross-industry success. He is the founder of Shadaka, Next Chapter, and other companies which focus on enabling sustainable and transformational changes. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Am I saying that company name right? Is it Shadaka?
Shadaka. Yes, it's fine.
Okay. All right. So next, what I want to do here, you have just whole chapters dedicated to really important, meaty stuff that really merit our understanding, attention, and focus to be able to help ameliorate them. So one of the first things you talk about is, of course, climate change. And I thought it was really, really, really interesting that you say neither a worldwide health crisis nor a region teetering on the brink of an all-out war is as worrisome to the Switzerland-based World Economic Forum as an issue that has been festering for many years. And then you go on to say that The group's 2021 Global Risks Report, Extreme Weather, Climate Action Failure, and Human Environmental Damage landed in the top 3 spots for significant risk by likelihood. And then, followed by that, was the COVID infectious diseases finished out. So the first 3 are about climate change. And I think that's really important for us to talk about. I did put a whole chapter in sustainability in my last book as well. So I'm really pleased. The way that you talk about it, though, Faisal, there's so much meat in it. There's so much for us to really understand the significance of it. So if you could just speak to a little bit of this note.
Sure. I mean, look, all we have to do is just look at the last 3 months, right? I mean, just look at the U.S., and we'll talk about global in a minute. I mean, we have a major flooding and major snow and major, thunderstorm and cyclone that we have never seen, at those locations, right? So you can debate all day long about what really causes climate change, and is it real, is it not, and all that stuff. But if you look at the economic impact of those issues or those the unpredictable climate impact, it puts a different business context, right? So when you talk about impact and when you talk about disaster and you boil it down to economic, context, it gives a whole different perspective. Because in pandemic, people could still work, and we did work, in whatever form we did work, right? But when the climate, this major disaster happens, because of the migration, because of the shutdown of businesses and rebuilding, et cetera, I mean, it's major, right? So if you think just from that context, it puts a different lens, right?
It's all right. You came we lost you at the different lens, if you can hear us. Just a sec. We're waiting for your sound to come back. Just a sec. We'll wait for you. It's all right. I think you're muted, by the way, Faisal. There you go. Now you're off mute. Go ahead. We were talking about the different lens you were saying there.
Right. So I'm saying that if you look at from economic with economic change, lens, it puts a different perspective. That's why I wanted to focus on climate change from that lens, not to debate whether it's real or not real and what it's doing. So because when you look at that, and then on the fact that it creates a migration and dislocation and business impact, it all becomes very real in terms of the change and the adversity that's faced by people and businesses as a whole. And that's why I wanted to focus on that. And we're increasingly seeing this change over and over again. And, just the way of background, I was originally born in Bangladesh, which is a delta, and we are constantly get flooded, in Bangladesh, which is right at the, on the Bay of Bengal. And it's disastrous. Right? So that's why, it's a major factor we should be thinking, moving us forward as a society and how we tackle this problem.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So important. We could talk more about that, but I want to delve into a few other things that you also queue up here. And one of them that I think is really important that I haven't seen much on here is misinformation.
Yes, another hot topic and a much debated topic, and it's getting increasingly, worrisome, because you've seen, I'm sure, especially, and when I wrote that book, ChatGPT and other AI products were not out there quite as much as it today. You look at how every side of society is using misinformation to mislead people from healthcare to war to whatever, it's worrisome, and it has become our individual responsibility to really focus on what's real and what's not real. And then you add the factor that these AI products are pushing the boundaries. Even we don't even know what pictures are real anymore, right? I mean, you see all these pictures are propping up all over the place. So the misinformation creates a sort of challenge. Anybody from students, educator, business leader, head of states. I do a lot of in our federal agency, especially DoD. So it's a major concern of our U.S. government. So it's worrisome, and it's another factor for how we're going to lead and how you're going to tackle society as a whole.
So one of the things that I really appreciate about what you wrote in the book, which I pulled out here and I want to quickly cover on this matter, is you say, still, it begs the question why so many people readily believe all sorts of misinformation, some of which can seem ludicrously inaccurate or exaggerated to many others. And then you say, one possible explanation is what might be referred to as, and this is awesome, expedient laziness. Presented with news or information that often requires corroboration, many might groan at the thought of plowing through other sources and sifting through claims and counterclaims. Instead, it's far easier and faster simply to ask others what they think, a relatively quick way to build confidence that something is, in fact, true, while gaining a degree of social acceptance by simply going along with the crowd. I think that's really important, the way that you cached that there, Faisal, because it does help us understand why we all tend to contribute to this problem. There's so much information thrown at us. That's the easier route.
For sure. And we all, we are, as a species, we like self-validation, right? So what better way to get validation rather than when you are in your tribe, if I could use that term. You're in your tribe and you're getting validated by your tribe. Yes, that is right, and you're right, and we're all right? So it's easy to do that. And the top of all that is that, we have become such a creature of bite size. This taglines and bite size. We don't want to know anything beyond that, right? So this combination of tribal mentality and laziness and this soundbite society is what gotten us where we are today, right? And obviously the tech companies doesn't help because they put us in those echo chambers and echo chambers where we like to hang around with our like-minded people. And it's kind of interesting because whenever everything connects, I talk about how we have to be purposely humble if you want to be innovative and creative. The reason we use that term was because of the fact that if you don't experience, you can't create. So that's true even to live, right? If you don't experience all facets of divergence ideas and counter points, then you cannot really grow, right? So misinformation isolates us. That's the whole point of misinformation. It's a belief system of a particular dogma, and it isolates us, and that prohibits us from being creative and to lead where we should be leading ourselves and others.
Beautifully explained. There's just so much richness to that. I really appreciate that, which really showcases to me the depth of your thinking and just how much you really have considered this matter. So all the more reason for me, I really wanted to make sure that we, especially as you as a technologist, weighed in on this notion. Okay, so next, one of the things that I also found really, really compelling about your book, this is in the notion under the category of individual opportunity. You say in your book, if there's a single word that encapsulates the opportunity afforded to individual leaders, it might be consumer. Tell us more about that.
Because we are all consumer now, right? Whether you're a head of a company or whether you are somebody who drives a Uber or a student or a teacher, we're all consumer, and we have massive power because we can decide if we like a particular product. We can decide whether we like a particular idea. We can decide and express our opinion. No, we do not like this, and we do not like that, and we were mistreated, and we were not taken care of, or we were excluded, not included, right? So we have all the voices. So, and one voice becomes 10 voice, 10 voice becomes 1,000 voice, right? So from that point of view, each one of us has enormous power of consuming and voicing what we like and don't like. So if you look at from that business context, again, that has a huge economic impact for a company leader or an organizational leader or even a political leader, right? Because one or two voice can actually destroy a political career, right? So it doesn't matter whatever kind of leader you are, you have to treat every single person as a consumer who has an enormous power, right? So even if you look at students, students have enormous choice today. You don't have to go to university to learn. You can go on YouTube and learn all day long, right? So that's where that notion came from, that the individual power, individual has been never be greater. And then that creates an opportunity, but that also creates a lot of challenges for organizations and companies and government leaders to how to corral them, which goes back to where we started, the whole notion of transformational leaders who needs to build brands and corral people with inspiration and influence, not just demand and some sort of a the transactional notion that we used to have in the past.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And I want to actually spend the last segment of our conversation focused specifically on the workplace, because that's the place that I really impact. So we'll do that, though, after we take our last break here. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Faisal Hoque. He's the author of Lift, Fostering the Leader in You Amid Revolutionary Change. We've been talking a bit about some of the key areas he focuses in his book. In this last segment, as I said, we're going to focus on how this really ports over to what matters in the workplace. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I mentioned to you in the last break that we're launching the Purpose and Joy Tour. The two latest books that will be part of those events that I wrote are The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business, which helps leaders to learn how to build elevating and high-performing cultures and leadership. The other book, very, very different, is called Coloring Life, How Loss Invites Us to Live More Vibrant Lives, which helps people navigating loss transform to growth and vitality. You can find them both on Amazon as well. If you're just now joining the program today, my guest is Faisal Hoque. He's an accomplished entrepreneur, senior executive, author, thought leader, public speaker, and advisor to management teams and boards of directors with more than 25 years of cross-industry success. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So as I said, this last segment, I really wanted to focus on the actual experience of people that are powering an organization, that being their employees specifically. And you talk in your book, as I also talked in the one that I mentioned here, about the employee-driven workplace, which I know for a lot of leaders is very, very, very problematic and difficult. But talk to us a little bit about your perspective on this employee-driven workplace.
Look, if you look at it from a work point of view, the idea of innovation, an idea of creativity, an idea of transformation is the forefront of every organization. So if you look from that point of view, who drives ideas and innovation and transformation? It's people, right? And it's not one leader, one person, that makes that happen. Innovation, transformation, creativity doesn't happen in isolation. It's a very collaborative and collective way of doing things that create something valuable. So often enough, leaders forget that, and they think that if we are not all together all the time, like post-pandemic, we're hearing nonstop that everybody needs to come to work all the time, and if you're not, we're not being productive and successful. That's actually a false notion, but it's also a false notion that we can all work in isolation and never be together, right? So balance is somewhere in between, right? So the the crux of the issue here is the fact that you have to create a structure and a process that drives that collective collaboration that actually inspiring, not process for process sake and a death by 1,000 policies. That's not going to work, and because of the fact that we talked about the empowerment of individual. Everybody has so many choices, especially the most talented people does have a lot of choices, and actually a lot of the progressive companies are now collaborating with people who are quote unquote lives in the economy because they can't attract the best people inside the organization all the time. So you leverage. Like I work with a couple of organizations where, especially in public sector, where from outside I lead their innovation because I bring a different perspective, and these are the new norm of our workplace. It's no longer that if you're not under my roof 7/24, it's not working. It's quite the opposite.
Mm-hmm. I have a whole chapter devoted to that in my last book as well, which is about looking at the IQ of your business and overhauling your processes so that you're not actually removing the soul of your employees for them to work there. So speaking of all this, one thing I have never heard of, a concept that you talk about in your book, is this idea of we working. Let's hear about that.
Look, I mean, I have used this term in various forms over the years. We working, cluster, knowledge center, et cetera, et cetera. The whole idea is that you grab people, a small group of people based on their expertise, and you bring this cross-functional, domain expertise so that you can learn from each other and do special projects. And it's a lot of the ideas is borrowed from, the creative industry, like movie industry, or even like when you talk about writing books, this process as well as I do. I mean, writing a book is a very collaborative process, even when you're writing a solo book, because you work with your editor, you work with your publisher, publicist, etc., etc. In movie industry, what happens? Today's leading actor, tomorrow's supporting actor, and tomorrow's leading lady is tomorrow's somebody's mom, right? So, et cetera, et cetera. So you take on different role as you try to create a project. And once you wrap your head around that kind of notion that I'm going to get my, most inspiring and talented people to do a particular project, and I'm going to move them around so that I can get the best output out of them, that's when we work together, because it's inspiring. It's inspiring to be a product developer today and then tomorrow be a product marketeer where I can take my idea and somebody else's idea to the market, right? So it comes from that notion that people likes variety. I mean, it's like this whole notion of purposefully omnivores that are used in Everything Connects, is that nobody wants to do the same thing over and over again. It becomes mundane. So how do you keep that creative juices following and create an environment that allows you to do that, right? So only way you can do that is if you let people play different roles, regardless of their quote unquote job title and their job description, and then that's where it comes from.
Did you use the phrase purpose omnivore? Is that what you said?
Yes, purposefully omnivorous. It's like
purposefully omnivorous. I love that. I've never heard that before, but I quite like it.
It actually comes from the food industry because the chefs, because they want to create new dishes, they have to eat whatever, and that's how they develop their palates. That comes from there, right? So, and as you know, food can be very creative. So I use that term in the context of business. If you don't experience different kind of media, different kind of job roles, and different kind of industry, it's hard to be creative because you have to learn from somewhere. If you're always doing the same thing over and over again, you're kind of losing your taste bud, and if I can use that term. So that's where that term comes from.
I love that, Faisal. So many people. I just delivered a program yesterday for a bank, and I there were people, these people are bored. These people would love to have that sort of rotation idea, work on different things, right? And so, of course, I was there to activate meaning and passion and purpose, and they desperately needed it. And that would be another thing for them to be able to do. So I love that whole concept. And then if we take it one step further, you're welcome. I also, of course, I'm a conscious capitalist. I'm on the board of Conscious Capitalism here in Dallas, and I talk about conscious capitalism in 2 of my books. So I really love what you say here when you say overall business and industry have the opportunity to serve as examples of the sort of comprehensive and genuine change that's possible during a time of enormous disruption. The business world has the power and the influence to truly dive into systemic causes for racism, gender inequality, and bias, and to take both internal and external steps to address them. And who doesn't want to be part of helping to solve those kind of problems?
Absolutely. And look, I mean, it's Peter Drucker, some almost 50 years ago, they talked about the notion of enterprise. It's not the idea that they live for making profit. They live to make an impact. And that idea got more and more evolved with conscious capitalism and other thought process around, the capitalism as we know as a whole. And as an entrepreneur, I mean, when I started out in my when I'm in my 20s, I was one of those tech entrepreneurs who wanted to build a tech company and make lots of money and et cetera, et cetera. But as time went by, you talk about purpose. I mean, you want to make a difference. You want to do things. You want to create things, and you want to build an organization, and you want to do things that makes an impact, whatever that impact is. And it's not one definition fits all. You could be a company of 3 people and make great impact, right? I mean, it could be an author can make a great impact. It could be look at the, you talk about food industry, look at Jose Andres, created this phenomenal organization that serves all around the world for needy people who are looking, who are hungry, right? So whatever that case may be, I think that, but in the context of business has a huge opportunity because we, it's a collection of people, and it's an organism, living, breathing organism that does a lot of things that impacts the whole ecosystem. So that's why I think the businesses have the biggest opportunity to make that kind of impact. And next generation businesses are going to be driven by that, and they're going to be the one most successful. And the people who are transactionally focused, they're going to be like one of the relics that nobody will remember.
That's exactly the word I was thinking, was relic. Okay, so now we're getting close to the end of the show already, but what I want to come to next is what I've really come to understand by reading your book, I believe, and you tell me if I've got this right. I really think that your notion of transformational leadership is really what it does is it builds on inspirational leadership, but then it adds this, boots on the ground action, this sense of agency. There's, this activation to it. And so I really appreciate that you talk about how transformational leadership de-emphasizes process in favor of results and outcomes, but implementing the characteristics and practices of transformational leadership and mandates practical, empirical application. So I really like that you really helped me take my notion of how I think about effective leadership really to another level by now looking at it as transformational leadership that builds on inspirational.
Yeah, look, I mean, inspiration is just it ignites ideas. It ignites people to do something, and it motivates people to be inspirational. But then you have to give people the tools and the process, not process them to death, but you still have to give them the tools and the culture and the process that allows them to systemically do something and take an idea to maturation, and to fulfill, to create that value that they're looking for, right? So that systemic thinking and systemic execution is other side of this coin. You have to inspire, but you also have to give them that the repeatable way of doing things that people can hang their hat on and measure whether they're really producing the right things at the right time, right? And it's not like how many hours you work, or did you show up to work at 8 o'clock and went home at 6 o'clock? It's more about what outcome did you drive from the work you have done, right? So the measurement matrix becomes much more impact driven and less about what you did or didn't do on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at a long-term view that you can repeat. And that's what transformation means. That's what the whole notion of transformation means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also wrote too, with regard to what you're talking about, that notion of is your derriere stapled into the seat from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Of course, that is, a presence mentality versus what you're talking about, which is a performance mentality. So I also read about that. It's just so important to change your perspective on what it is you're evaluating here.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. So, and go ahead.
Sorry, but just because we're getting close about a time, I really want you to talk a little bit about one of the other things that I think is critical in your book is the essential value of experiential learning. If you could just say a little bit about that and kind of how that works, especially in the workplace, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we learn from experience. The biggest learning that stays on with us is experience. You and I can talk about this for hours because we have very similar mentality, but we talk about bad times and bad situation actually gives us the biggest lessons, right? So
no
experience
doubt.
gives us the biggest, So and it applies at individual level, it applies as a society. Look at the behavioral changes we have seen post-pandemic, right? We now go to a restaurant and we don't think twice about scanning a QPR code and reading a menu and order, right? But imagine the impact of climate and paper savings and the behavioral change. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't go through the force because of the pandemic, right? So from that context, those kind of learning is the biggest learning. So if we can more focus on highlighting what we're learning from each one of our daily experiences and as an organization as a whole, and then try to leverage that learning, that has the biggest impact than anything else. No books, no classes, no university will teach you as much as real life experience will teach you.
No question. You do have something in the book. We don't have time to talk about it. I just want listeners and viewers just to understand that he's got some really great examples in the book of how to use like AI or virtual reality to be able to experience something that you wouldn't otherwise have any ability to experience in order to get that learning. It's really powerful. All right, so we're at the end of the show already, and the show is listened to by people around the world, Faisal, who are interested in finding and creating workplaces where they can actually want to come to work, do their best, grow into the people they want to become. They're led by inspirational leaders that bring them to their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with?
Look, what I would like to leave them with is the fact that do your best, try to change yourself. If you change yourself, you change the world. And in terms of grandiose ideas, great, but only you can live others when you live yourself. I'll use that same tagline that I used in the book. And that's really it. And if we do it, each one of us did our best, hopefully the planet will be a better place for all of us.
I'm up for that, Faisal. I'm really happy to know you. I'm grateful that you came into my world and I got to read your book and share it with my listeners and viewers. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
Thank you.
Listeners, viewers, if you want to learn more about Faisal Hoque, the work he and his team do, or his books, you can start by going to his personal website. It's his name, Faisal Hoque. Let me spell that for you. Faisal is Faisal. His last name is Hoque, Hoque. So FaisalHoque.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Julia Fabris McBride, talking about the book she co-authored called When Everyone Leads, the Toughest Challenges Get Seen and Solved. A very illuminating conversation, much like this one, about the dynamic changes in the world, ushering in the need for an elevated and encompassing leadership dynamic. Next week, we'll be on the air with Charles Jones, talking about his book, Emotional Intelligence for Stress-Free Leadership. He is putting forth a very fresh perspective on the role of emotions and how we can positively work with them to get better results in relationships. He's kind of taking on some of the traditional ideas around emotional intelligence. It should be a really fascinating conversation. See you there, and remember that work is an integral and important part of our lives, and it can be one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.